about the purpose of marriage, which is intimate fellowship, and the basic biblical or theological principles, which are covenant, the principle of the transcendent femininity and masculinity, the principle of the hierarchy, principle of stewardship, and the principle of grace. Now, it's all very nice to talk about those things, but how do you make them work? How do you translate those principles into the day-by-day, everyday kind of living that it takes to make a marriage work? I just finished reading a book this week. It was written in 1850 or thereabouts. The thing almost fell apart while I was reading it. Actually was. And it was written by Peter Cartwright, who's an old, he was a Methodist circuit riding preacher in the end of the 1700s and early 1800s for over 50 years. And as the frontier moved west, he rode the circuits. It's called the name of the book is autobiographical. The name is called The Backwoods Preacher, and he tells in one of the chapters of the book he tells about this meeting he held, and it was an old Dutchman he calls, and they call anybody who was of northern Germany a Scandinavian extract. They called them Dutchmen back those days. And he said he had preached on a believer had to take up his cross and bear it. And after the service, he stood around and talked for a while, and then head off down the road. And here was this old Dutchman. He had been in the service with carrying his wife on his back. And he stopped him and asked him why he was carrying his wife on his back. And he said, "Well, you said, preacher, you're supposed to take up your cross and bear it, and she's it. She's such a scold. She's my greatest cross, and I must save my soul," is what he said. To bear his... Well, is marriage really a cross to bear? For many, I fear it is. And that's very bad, isn't it? Marriage is a burden to be carried, a trial to be endured. We even make jokes about it. But it doesn't have to be that way, because God wants us to be happy. As I said last night, the principle of the modern value of personal happiness does not outvote the covenant. We start with the idea of a covenant. Marriage is a covenant, what God has joined together. And you see, Christians have a better reason than anybody else to make a marriage work. See, if you're not a Christian, you can have an open-ended contract. You know, as the old saying is, for better, for worse, but not for long. And the modern theory is, we'll just get married and try it. If it doesn't work, we'll get divorced. You know, it only costs $25 now. And try something else. We have no-fault insurance in Florida and no-fault marriages. And do you know that? We really do. No-fault car insurance, no-fault marriage. Don't you know what you have here? And so we'll get married. If it doesn't work, we'll just call it off and try again. Well, a Christian can't do that. And so we have to figure out ways to be happy. And so our marriage is not a cross to bear, but it's a celebration. It's a joy. Now, there's any such thing as a perfect marriage. I don't have one. You don't either. Dick says that he does, but Suzanne says they don't. And so you can make up your own mind on that. But yeah. And so we have to learn some of the secrets and skills of marriage. Now, I teach that marriage is a skill to be learned. Now, I may not be right about that, but that's what I teach anyway. You see, we have some myths in our culture, and we have some myths in the church. One of our cultural myths is the myths that we create by weddings. Now, I've had a lot of weddings. I don't have as many as most preachers. I never performed a wedding after I learned better as a young preacher, unless I knew I was establishing a Christian home. It didn't make much sense to me to spend most of the week trying to create Christian homes through evangelism, and then at the wedding altar establish a non-Christian home. I didn't do that. But anyway, you know what a wedding is. It's unreality is what it is. I mean, she's never going to look that good again. I mean, right? $250 for my daughter. My daughter just got married last June. My oldest daughter, and she puts that dress on. I mean, she looks good. And he is never going to, he's not going to look that good again until they bury him. Probably not then. He has to rent a tuxedo because he doesn't own one. Why? He doesn't wear tuxedos, so he rents one. Right? And we get them in a high state of emotion, in an artificial situation, and make them promise to stay that way the rest of their life. And it doesn't work. I threatened one time to write a wedding ceremony that really that has some connection with marriage. Theoretically, and I won't do this because I'm a coward, but that's when I get too old to care what anybody thinks about me. I'm going to write a wedding that has something to do with a marriage. He's going to stand there in his old flannel shirt that she hates, and with 2 days growth of beard and BO, and she's going to have some kind of strange contraption in her hair with Vicks salve, and I'm going to get 2 kids to cry through the whole wedding. And I'm going to have all 4 in-laws in the wedding. They're going to be in the marriage. Might as well be in the wedding. And I'm going to have her mother mad at him for something. I'm going to have a little flower girl, but she's not going to throw flowers. She's going to throw dirty underwear. They're going to walk on. When's the last time you walked on flower petals, right? And then on, and when I get through the whole wedding, I'm going to charge him $800 I didn't tell him about. Surprise him. Well, I'm just kidding you, of course. But we have this myth. We say, well, they love each other. They'll work everything out. Aren't they cute? Don't they look nice? Don't they love each other? Isn't that sweet? They'll work it out. No, they won't. They won't work it out unless they know how. You see, I've counseled couples who loved each other before, during, and after the divorce. Love wasn't the problem. They just couldn't work it out. Just didn't know how to make it work. Now, and the Christian version of this myth is, well, if they love Christ and if they pray, their marriage will work. No, it won't. So we get this idea that out there in the world, all their marriages are unhappy, but here in the church, all our marriages are great. That's false. It isn't true. You see, the baptismal waters, through faith, wash away sins and do not take away ignorance. And if we don't know how to make it work, it isn't going to work. You see, Christianity does not give us a guarantee of a good home. You got that? Being a Christian is no guarantee of having a good home. All that Christianity gives us is a better reason than anybody else has for having a good home. And it gives us some principles if we'll learn them. So Christians have a better reason to make the home work, but they aren't. But if we do not learn the skills, the secrets and skills of married life, it isn't going to work. I'm going to tell you some things this weekend, and I learned these. I'm not going to tell you how I learned them. Some of them I learned through experience. Some I learned through books. Some I got directly from heaven. If all Roberts can, why not me? Right? Just kidding. And whenever I present this, I have people who've been married 20 or 30 years say, I'm serious. They'll say, well, now I finally understand the old boy. I'm serious. You get people who have been married all these years and begin to figure each other out. So, while this is what I mean, that love is a great motive and Christianity is a great motive, and I believe that if we pray for wisdom, God will help us. That's one of the great promises in Scripture. I lived on that promise during 10 years, my first 10 years in the ministry. James chapter 1. If James chapter 1 had been cut out of my Bible, I never made it in the ministry. If any man lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all men liberally, and upbraideth not. So I think if we pray, God will give us wisdom. I believe that very much. And if anything calls for wisdom, it's married life. Family life calls for wisdom. And so we come to secrets and skills. By that I mean, what are some of the things we need to know to build upon these sound biblical principles that I talked about last night? Now, the first thing I want to focus on the principle of grace. I believe very much in grace. And what grace means, and by the way, the Bible teaches very clearly that our relationship to God is of grace. And therefore, our relationship with each other must be based on grace. The biblical statement is, as God has forgiven us, so we must forgive one another. And one of the big mistakes Christians try to make is they want grace when they're looking at God, but they want law when they're looking at their neighbor. And you cannot do that. God has made it very clear to us. For instance, even in the what we call the Lord's Prayer, which is the model prayer. Forgive us our trespasses, even as what? We forgive those who trespass against us. And the Bible has Jesus in the story of the unjust judge, you recall. In the story of the servant who was forgiven much but would forgive nothing himself. And in many other teachings, Jesus made it very clear that we cannot live by law with one another and expect grace from Him. We've got to choose right now. It's either all law or all grace. And if you live with me by law, you and I aren't going to get along very well, because I'm not good enough to live by law. I need grace, and so do you. So does my wife. So do my kids. Now, grace means operate that with our mates. Now, when I look at my wife, I've got a decision to make. Am I going to operate from the starting point of my rights, or am I going to operate from the starting point of her needs? There's a decision. What is going to govern my attitudes? Am I going to say, well, now what are my rights, or am I going to ask the question, what are your needs? You can't do both. And I'll just promise you this: you want to have a miserable home, you just get in the rights business, and I promise you, your home isn't going to work. So and again, the question is not what I need, but what do you need? That's grace. You got that? Operate from the point of view of that's why God saved us. God had a right to send us to hell, but we had a need to be forgiven, and so the cross was His response to where He reconciled His rights and our needs. Cost Him His Son. And husbands ought to love their wives as Christ loved the church, which means it's going to cost us something, fellas and ladies. It's going to cost us self, the death of self. And so it doesn't matter what my rights are. The question is, what are my wife's needs? And the other way. You understand that? That's the principle. Which means that I try to deal with her from her point of view. Now, that's the principle. How does this work? Well, I want to come down to a great secret. You ready? This is a great secret, and it's this: that the men and women are different. Again, like I said last time, I'm not talking about plumbing. I mean, men and women are really different. Men and women are more different than men and women know that they are different. And so the way we learn the secret and create the skills to build upon the principle of grace is that I need to learn how my wife is different so that I can operate with her in my relationship with her from her point of view, not my point of view. And most women, not because they aren't well motivated, but most women relate to their husbands psychologically, if I can use that term. Most women relate to their husbands as if they were other men, or other women, I mean. And men relate to their wives as if they were other men. It causes a great deal of harm in marriages. Not because people are evil, because they don't know any better. Take it from me. Most of what I'm teaching you, I learned the hard way. You got that? Most women relate to their husbands as if they were other women. And men as if their wives were other men. But you can't do that. Men and women are different. I'm going to talk about this afternoon some of the ways they're different. The first way is this: that men operate, and I'll give you the words, and you probably know what they mean, but I'll explain exactly how I'm using them. Men operate atomistically, and women operate holistically. They simply operate differently. By that I mean women. Now, by the way, what I'm saying what I'm giving you are generalities. It's not true of all women, not true of all men. It's true of most women. It's true of most men. And it's true in different degrees, you understand? It's more true of some men than other men, more true of some women than other women. So if I don't hit you then you're probably right. You understand? These are generalities. It's true in different degrees, but it's generally true about most men, generally true about most women to different degrees. The women operate holistically. That is, a woman's life does. If you want to picture it as a chain, a woman's life is like a chain where all the links are intermeshed and to form a net, so that every part of a woman's life is hooked on to every other part of her life. And what happens in one part of a woman's life deeply affects how she feels in another part of her life. Or to switch my metaphors, I had an old friend who was in the Navy during the Second World War, and he said they had an ironclad rule on board ship that you could not go through one bulkhead door until you could not open this one until you closed the one behind you. As in case they got torpedoed, the thing wouldn't sink. You could not. You had to close this door behind you. Then you could open the door in front of you. And a man can operate atomistically. It's like, again, the first metaphor, the chains in a man's life aren't even linked together at all. A man can compartmentalize his life, and a woman can't. And most men don't know that about their wives, and most women don't know that about their husbands. And what happens in one part of a man's life, he is more able than his wife to sort of shut the door and operate pretty well in another part of his life. It creates a great deal of a heartbreak and misunderstanding in homes. So men atomistically, women holistically. Now, our principle of grace says to me that I must operate from my wife realizing that she operates the way she does, that she's holistically oriented, and I must operate from her point of view. That's grace. Now, what does this mean? Well, I'll give some practical areas of application. You see, most fellows don't know. Do you ever have a fight with your wife, fellas? And not a big fight, a little spat on the way, and so you slam the door on the way out to work. No big deal, just a little set to. And come home at night, and of course by 11 o'clock you've forgotten all about it, and by 3 o'clock you're happy as a clam. You come home at night and you say, "Hi, honey." And she starts right in the middle of the sentence that you slammed the door on that morning. She'll just pick up right where you left off. You see, she hadn't forgotten a thing. Now the reason I'll tell you why that and he'll say, "Are you still mad about that little old thing? You still griping? What kind of person are you? Hateful, unforgiving?" He's thinking. He may not say it. If he's smart, he won't. She's hateful and unforgiving. She's still mad after. He's not mad. Why? And you know what she's thinking? She's not saying it either. She's saying, "Boy, he is sure insensitive, unfeeling." No, he's a man, she's a woman. See, he's closed doors in his life. And he closed some doors in his mind. By the time he got halfway to work, he had a couple of doors closed, and he had a good day, but she didn't. You see, what happens to a man at 9 o'clock in the morning doesn't necessarily affect how he's going to operate at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, if it's not too important. But a woman, she doesn't have any doors to close, and she wishes she did. And so, and a woman can't really close the door at all unless it's resolved. You know that? Here's how a man operates. A man can think things through logically, explain them to himself, and close the door on it. If a man has a problem, here's what he'll do. He'll think through the worst case scenario, what's the worst that can happen, the possibilities, and if nothing can be done about it, he'll say, well, nothing can be done about it, and he'll close the door pretty much, and operate pretty well. He'd go on with life. Just go on. And a woman, if she's hurting about something, she'll think it out, and she may even admit to herself that nothing can be done about it. It's not going to be changed, but it doesn't help her one bit. She's still miserable. Fella, did you ever win an argument with your wife that you lost? That you won logically, but somehow you didn't win? You had all the facts, but didn't make any difference. You see, here's how a man deals with a problem. You ready? A man, if he has a problem, he won't go find somebody to talk it over with. He'll work it out in his own mind, and once it's worked out, it's either solved or not solved, but he gets on with his life. But a woman can't do that. And he doesn't know that she can't do that. And a woman struggles with this. Because, you see, if a woman has a problem, she needs it resolved in some way, or she needs somebody to care that she's hurting. But I'll come back to that point in just a moment. I don't want to mix two things up here. The women operate holistically. Fellas, what you say to your wife on Monday morning is going to directly affect how she feels about you on Thursday night. You may not remember what you said on Monday morning. Be careful what you say to your wife, especially if it's bad. Now, if it's good, somehow the rule is broken. You can tell you can tell her you love her 10 times today, and during the night she leaks. I mean, it all runs away somewhere, and you start at goal the next day. But you can tell her something bad in April. It's still with her in February. I learned one of the things I picked up on this. I worked my way through undergraduate school working on the freight docks in Cincinnati. And on those docks were some of the roughest men. I mean, I worked with men who could cuss you out in 4 languages and did regularly. Rough men. And I've seen men on the docks almost come to blows at 11 o'clock in the morning, and at 5 o'clock when they checked out, go out and have a beer together. I've seen women in the office getting in an argument in the morning, and the next April they're still fighting. 2 years later, they're still mad at each other. It goes on and on. Why? Because women just have a tough time dealing with unresolved things. They just can't. They don't have doors to close. And let me illustrate it this way: things get tied together for a woman. A man he goes out and buys a new Chevrolet Camaro, and he says to his wife, "Honey, we got 48 payments to go. And try to not get it banged up right away. You know, we don't get a new car very often, or a motor scooter, whatever it is." And so, so she does pretty good for a couple of weeks, and then it gets a little bit careless and gets a scratch on the door, not a very big scratch. And boy, he comes home and sees it, and the fight is on. And he lets her have it. I don't ask much, and. And the least you could do, these cliches, and he's really letting her have it over the car door. Now, what she doesn't realize is that he's a man, and he loves her dearly. In fact, in a couple 3 hours when they go to bed, he's gonna be interested in some affection. He's got plans for later on in the evening. He'd die for her, but he's really mad about that door. And so he's letting her have it, but that's all you understand? All he's talking about is that door, the car door. He's not talking about the relationship. He's crazy about her. He's just mad about the door. But that's not what she's hearing. You know what she's hearing? He obviously loves that car more than he does me. Our marriage must be in real trouble if a little old scratch on the door can do this to it. If he gets that mad, something's really wrong with you. You got what I'm saying? He's talking about the car door, and she's talking about the relationship. And if she's a young wife, she may even say it. She'll say, "Well, obviously, if you loved me, you wouldn't be talking like this." And he didn't have the foggiest notion of what she's talking about. You understand? He's not talking about whether he loves her or not. Of course he loves her. He loves her dearly. That's nothing. You understand? It has nothing to do with what's going on in his mind. And so she needs to know that he can be mad about one thing about her, and one thing she did, and love her passionately, and every other, that he's just mad about that one thing, and if in an hour or two he'd be over it. And then he's going to wonder why she's not over it. You see, he's just had a little spat about a car door, and she's gone through a crisis about their marriage. Because she doesn't know that's a man talking to her. It's like it's another woman. And you get what I'm saying? She needs to realize that he can be really upset about one thing, and that's it. But he needs to realize, and you need to realize this, fellas, that your wife ties everything together. And a woman's ability to respond to her husband in every way is directly tied to how you see in the sexual relationship. And I don't want to get too specific, but in the sexual relationship, this really comes to bear. See, a woman's ability to respond to her husband depends upon their total relationship. You see, a man, he can have 4 or 5 days when he's really busy and doesn't have much time to spend with his wife. And he cannot even not say 10 words to her other than just conducting business, and be very much in love with her. But he's working on this now, and then he's done with that, and he's working on this, and it's Wednesday afternoon, he's getting this project done, but he's got something scheduled for Thursday morning, and then Thursday afternoon he has got these 3 appointments, and then comes Friday morning, and he hasn't said boo to his wife hardly, just say howdy and go on all the way. And so he's done with that. And then it comes Friday night, and it's 11 o'clock, and now he's ready for her. Got that? He's gone through this, and now he's ready for her. And she's not ready for him. Why? She'll say, well, now I have your attention. All you're interested in is sex. Why? You don't really love me. Well, you haven't talked to me all week. And she'll say some very dirty things to him sometimes, which is not true. And he will say to her, well, you're cold and unresponsive. He thinks she's cold and she thinks he's unfeeling. Not true at all, usually. Well, you don't have a bad marriage, you've got bad communication. You see, she doesn't have any concept of this thing, of him loving her all the while he hasn't paid any attention to her from her point of view. And he doesn't know what she's talking about. So he doesn't know that her ability, not her willingness, not her desire, but her ability to respond to him on Friday night depends upon how he treated her all week. Got that? It's all tied together. You see, when you ask a man about sex, he'll think about what happens in bed. If you ask a woman about sex, she'll think about their total relationship. She'll think about how he treated her at supper Tuesday. She'll think about, did he take time out to take a little walk with me on Wednesday? And see what I'm saying? It's all tied together. It's a very general thing for a woman, a very specific thing for a man. And so what do we do? Well, the rule is, the principle of grace teaches us that in all these things, we meet as near to the middle as we can, as often as we can. Men are not going to become women, and women are not going to become men. And we're always going to have areas of bad communications. There is always be a difference. And as the French say, vive la différence. The difference is great. But we try to meet as near the middle as we can, as often as we can. Which means, in this case, for instance, a woman must be more patient and a man must be more sensitive. A woman must realize that he really can be real busy all week and not pay any direct attention to her and love her dearly. The fact, you see, a woman interprets if a man more or less ignores his wife all week because he's busy, she interprets that as he doesn't really care about me. And that's not necessarily true, you understand? She has no conception that a man can really care about her and not pay continuing attention to her. But he can, ladies. He can. And a man needs to realize that she has no conception of that. And he needs to be sensitive to the fact he's married to a woman, not to another man. And he needs to give attention to her. I'm very serious. He needs to call her up on Thursday morning and say, hey, how are you? I got 10 minutes off here at work, and I'm on my break. I just got to thinking how lucky I am to have you. Thought I'd call you up and tell you. See you later. You'll see him later, all right. A woman needs to know, fellas, that you're thinking about her all the time. And a woman needs to realize that a husband really can be thinking about her, very in love. Does that make sense to you? It's just a matter of this very thing I'm talking about. Now, another area of difference which I suggested is, and don't misunderstand this. And when I say men and women are different, I am not saying that one way is smart and the other is silly. One is good, one is bad. No, just different. And it's very true. It's very important when it comes to this matter that I'm going to talk about now. Men tend to operate more by logic. Women tend to operate more by emotions. In life, a good marriage needs both. I'm not saying that women are silly. As a matter of fact, women very often come to the truth much quicker than men do by the path of logic, especially in personal problems. Women are, if you got a problem that involves people, a woman will figure out what's going on a week before her man does. Or maybe he never will. But he's being very logical about it. So I'm not saying that one is smart and one is stupid. I'm simply saying that men tend to operate more by logic, women by emotion, although women do use logic and men do use emotion. For instance, I learned this the hard way. I was in a local ministry, and my wife, she would tell me, well, something's wrong with somebody. She'd name them. And I'd say, no, that doesn't make any sense. I was with them 2 hours a day and talked with them, discussed it with them. There's no problem. She says, you'll find out. And 2 weeks later, or for 2 months later, I found out she was never wrong. Women read people better than men do, and it's spooky to man. My wife, she can judge what it takes me 3 months to find out about a person. She finds out in 3 minutes.
That's right.
If my wife says a person is a certain kind of person, I've learned to listen to her. She's never been wrong. And I don't know how she knows. It's not logical, but it's almost always true. They pick up on things. They know. For instance, women, if a marriage is in trouble, a woman knows it 3 years before the man does. A lot of men have come home for lunch and found a note on the kitchen table, goodbye, honey, I'll never see you again. And he didn't even know there was a problem. And because he thought it out logically. And it comes to solving, again, this thing. Remember I asked the question, fellas, did you ever win an argument that you lost? Here's how this comes out, especially young marriages. Something will happen that really hurts a wife. She's upset. And what he'll do is he'll explain everything to her the way he explains everything to himself. You know, he may even get out a blackboard. I used to do this. He almost get out a blackboard. Let me outline this problem for us, And I'd say, now here are the problem, and there's 3 possibilities with subpoints that can be done, And so I'd say, honey, you can see that there's nothing, we only got one choice to make, and we have to do this, and this is what it's going to have to be. You see that, don't you? Unassailable logic, yes. And then an hour later, she's still unhappy about it. And then he'll start this business. Well, honey, you're being silly. I thought we talked this out. I thought we understood. Was it logical? Yes. You see, he's operating in regard to his wife as if she were another man. That's what a man does with himself. He explains it to himself. Once it's all explained, worked out, all the ducks in a row, he can live with it. And he can't figure out why she sometimes can't. The reason is she's a woman, which makes her sensitive to people, you understand? Makes her, one of the things that makes her that way. Oh my. I'll give you a little illustration of this. I'll try to be practical. My wife is one of the wisest people I know, but she's not always the most logical. Sometimes I'm logical and she's right. But sometimes I'm right. You need both. You understand? There's a time. For instance, here's a young couple on a tight budget, but they need a night out, need some romance, but they can't afford it. What do you do? Well, sometimes a man can go through it logically and say, honey, we can't afford it. Here are the figures. Math doesn't lie, so we can't do it. Well, okay. Sometimes you have to do. If you don't have that kind of thinking, sometimes you go broke. You have to be careful, don't you, financially? But sometimes you need to say, well, it's true we can't afford it, but let's do it anyway. We'll figure out how to pay for it later. Why? Because right now we need a good marriage. We need a good evening together more than we need good math. You understand? We need an unbroken relationship better than we need a sound budget. Just, you see the difference? Sometimes you need to go one way, and especially to raising kids. Sometimes you need the father there to straighten everything out logically, but sometimes you need the mother to come in and say, okay, now, let's handle it this way. And he needs to listen. Sometimes he needs to listen to her, and sometimes she needs to listen to him. Do you see that? You need both. In a good marriage, I think you have the proper blending of emotion and logic. If you just have all logic, you can have a nice legal system. That's good for the military. You know, that's good. Everything's logical in the military. But you see, raising kids is not the same thing as training recruits. And I'll give you an illustration of this. About 3 or 4 years ago, we had some remodeling done in our house. My wife can't stand clutter, dust. She's not a fastidious housekeeper, but she's a very neat housekeeper, and she likes things in order. And I knew she was going to have a hard time of it. And because we're going to have plaster dust, which is very bad in the house, we have to knock out a door, and we're going to knock out a window, put a door in, and it's going to be a mess for a while. It has some carpet laid. And I said to her, I could just see her coming. I could see the clouds coming. She was dreading it. About a week and a half of living in the middle of a clutter, which is really hard on her. And so I explained to her twice, as I recall. Now, honey, you realize, don't you, there's no way we can have the remodeling job done without the mess. Yes, it's very logical, understand? See, what I did, I don't like mess either, but since I'm being a man, I understand you got to have the mess to have the house look the way you want it to look. I was happy as a clam. I can live with the mess. Didn't bother me. Besides, I wasn't there all day. And but I could see that she was. So I explained it to her twice. You understand, honey? Yeah. Because she was saying little things like, "Oh, it's going to be such a mess. I hope nobody comes over," and this kind of thing. And so when the day came, when the workers showed up, I had learned. You see, in the old days, what I would have said is, when she got the blues and would get a little bit snippy and gripey and unhappy when the house was a mess, I'd have said, "Honey, you're being silly. I thought you understood," which really would have helped the situation a lot. That would have just done wonders for my wife. No, I learned. I'm serious. I'm not very bright, but I learned after about the 5th time around. And so the day when the workers showed up and they tore everything out and there was a big mess, I sent her a dozen roses. And I had a note on it that said, "Honey, I know this is hard for you." It's the stupidest thing I ever did. From my point of view, you can't smell roses. 3 days later, they're dead. And we could have spent the money on something else. I could have bought 3 pair of socks. That's how a man thinks. Right? That's how a man thinks. But, you see, I learned that what my wife needed, she didn't need another explanation of how that she was being silly. She didn't need me to explain that we had to put up with the mess for a few days. What she needed was someone to care that she was hurting. That's what she needed. See, I can explain it to myself and live with it. I'm very logical. I teach logic, as a matter of fact. But I've learned over the years I'm married to a woman, not to another man. You got that? And that helped her. You understand? She still was unhappy with it, but it helped her, because every time she'd walk by the coffee table, there'd be those roses with that note saying, "Honey, I know this is hard for you." And she knew that somebody cared, and it helped her get through that. That's called dealing with a woman from her point of view. And I'll just share that with you. Now, I'll tell you all the times that I did right. I'm not going to tell you about all the times I did wrong. Do you see the point? That's called grace. Now, women need to, and my wife practices grace much more than I do. Most of what I know about having a good home, I learned from her. But women need to do this. For instance, a man needs to deal with a woman from her point of view. That is emotion. Sometimes that's pure emotion. See, it made her feel better, but it doesn't make any sense to me. It wouldn't make me feel better. If she just sent me a jar of aftershave lotion and say, "Honey, I know you don't like the clutter," I'd have thought she was nuts. I'd have probated the old girl if she'd have done that for me. But so it didn't make any sense to me. But a woman needs to extend grace too. For instance, a woman needs to realize that ladies, sometimes you drive your husband crazy. Do you realize it's hard for a man to operate in a situation that doesn't make sense to him? Do you know how hard it is for your man to do something that he thinks is unreasonable? It's very hard on a man. He genuinely suffers when he's explained to you 6 times why this is the way it has to be, and you're still upset. And he doesn't know what else to do. And so sometimes you need to be, you understand? We need to meet as near to the middle as we can, as often as we can. This is a great principle. By the way, I'll add parenthetically. You ever heard of a 50-50 marriage? That's sort of a unisex marriage. Everybody's equal. Well, I don't believe in that. The Bible says the husband head of the house. When I got married, I thought, well, honey, we'll have a 90-10 marriage. That'll be a good balance. I'm 90, you're 10. 3 days after the wedding, we were down to 51-49. I had a bare majority. I was hanging on, But I don't believe in 50-50 marriages. I don't believe in 90-10 marriage. I don't even believe in 51-49. I believe in 85-85. He gives 85%, and she gives 85%, and you live on what slops over in the middle. That's called grace. You got that? What slops over in the middle is what you build your marriage on. And so we need to meet in the middle. You understand? I need to send my wife the roses, but she needs to back off sometimes and realize that she's driving me crazy because she won't let it drop. Something like that tears a man up. Here's something that's a problem has come up and it's been dealt with the best you can, and he's ready to drop it and go on. So he close the door and move on. He's reasoned it out logically, and she's still carrying it around. Still bringing it up. And he'll say to her, honey, how long are you going to keep on with this? I thought we talked this out. I thought you understood. And he's going nuts. So sometimes, ladies, you need to operate from his point of view, if you can. Does this make sense to you? You see, it's men and women are different. And grace teaches us that we, as much as we can, and we can't do it completely, conversation talking about something, some situation, someone, I'll say, honey, this is a delightful conversation, and I'm very glad to be in it, and we've been talking now for about 5 minutes. It would help a lot if you would tell me what we're talking about. Now, yeah. Now the trap in this is that she spent 2 or 3 hours maybe, or 45 minutes or so and so early in the day talking to her phone buddy, her conversation buddy, her friend, and her friend knew exactly what she was talking about. My wife and her sister can end a conversation 1 week and pick it up right in the middle 4 weeks later, and my wife's sister always knows what my wife is talking about. She always knows. And sometimes, and sometimes if I'm present, I'll say, honey, you didn't mean what you just said, did you? And she'll say, and her sister will say, no, I know what you meant. She'll say, no, I didn't mean this, I meant this. Or say, yeah, I know what she meant. Her sister always knows. Spooky is what it is. I think it's occult. It's the occult. It's bound to be something. Just paranormal or ESP, whatever it is. Now, but listen to me. Women are much better communicators than men are. Women communicate very well with other women. They just sort of throw, a woman is talking to her best friend, they can just throw words out in chunks. Just whatever comes to mind, they just dump it out. And her friend sorts it out and listens, and her friend doesn't hear what she says. Her friend hears what she means. Isn't this right? It's exactly right. And they can, see, women take all kinds of shortcuts, and women read between the lines, they listen between the lines. They speak in shorthand and listen in shorthand, and they are great communicators with other women. Problem is that when the husband comes home, a woman will talk to her husband as if he were another woman, and he often. See, men can't operate like that. Do you ever have this happen in your house? She'll say something to him, and he'll get upset. He'll get his feelings hurt. And he'll say, "Why would you say something like that?" And her response is, "Well, all I said was," and then she'll repeat it. And he'll say, "That's what I thought you said. Why would you say that?" And after about the 5th time around, and his ears have turned red, she'll say, "Now, why do you jump on everything I say? You know," you got that? "Why do you jump on everything I say? You know I didn't mean that." Got that? You know, now her friend would have known she didn't mean it. But listen, ladies, I'm going to tell you a great secret. He thinks you mean what you say. It's a great secret in marriage. He thinks you mean what you say. Because if a man will come, on the average, will come much closer than his wife to saying what he means. That is, when a man talks to another man, whether he is saying what he means or not, he intends to say what he means. And if you talk to a man, he thinks you mean it. That is, he thinks that the words that you use are the ones you wanted to use, and that they convey the meaning, not what is written between the lines, not the suggestions, what you really said. And often men get very hurt by this. And women feel like, women say that, "You jump on every word, you're just there waiting for me to say the wrong thing," and communications break down. Isn't that true? Very true. So what does this mean? Especially if a woman is angry, she aims that shotgun at the nearest target, not necessarily the real target. Now, men do this too, but they have to really get extra angry to do it. Fellas, you ever get in trouble for something you had nothing to do with? I mean, you know, she was mad at A, and you are B, and you're handy, and she unloads at you. I used to really, until I learned this, my wife and I used to have some real go-arounds. I'd come in, and she had just really let me have it. But she's not talking about me, she's talking about this over here. And I'll say, "Well, okay, why are you jumping on me for?" Then I draw out my classic line. This is a man talking. I'd say, "It's not fair. I didn't do it. Why are you bawling me out for it?" You see. And I've learned to shuffle my feet. One of the secrets to a happy marriage, learn to shuffle your feet. See, what I would do, she'd come in and she'd just unload on me. In fact, we had a joke in the earlier years of our marriage called War in China. War in China. That's why I said, we're going to... I said one time, "Honey, I believe if Russia declared war on China, you'd blame me." and used to see. I would think she meant what she was saying. See, she was using words emotionally, not logically. There you are again. She was unloading, getting rid of a lot of garbage, and I used to get very defensive. Still do once in a while when I forget that it's a woman talking to me, not another man. She doesn't necessarily mean it. And before I do it, she'd just come on, really unload on me. You know what I mean, fellas? Really unload. I get very defensive. I'd explain to her points 1, 2, and 3 with subpoints why it was not fair. I'm not guilty. You know, this doesn't make sense. And I noticed it just made her madder. I wasn't gaining anything at all. I wasn't helping the situation. And so I learned to shuffle my feet. She unloads on me. I just kind of shuffle my feet and let her go. And pretty soon she'll shoot again, but she'll be a little closer to the real target, and she'll just keep going. And if I listen long enough and keep my mouth shut, pretty soon I find out what she's really talking about, what she's really mad at. She gets the thing aimed in the right direction, hits the real target, which wasn't me. Saves a fight. You see, I got hit by, I just happened to get handy. You understand? A woman will often shoot at the handiest target, not the right one. Now, and in crisis situations, I recommend the art, one of the secrets and skills of marriage is the secret of priming the pump. It's a great aid to communication. You know what priming the pump is? Where I grew up, we didn't have city water, we call it public water. We used to have an old pump in this kitchen, and the seals, you know, go bad in those things. And so we had to keep a bucket of water handy to prime the pump every set too long without being used. Pour a little in, get more out. And one of the great arts, and women and men need this. Men shoot the wrong target too. Do you ever have he stomps in the house and he just really lets his wife have it, kicks the dog and cusses the goldfish, and he says nobody has to put up with what I have to put up with. I'm quitting that stupid job. And then she'll say something real brilliant like, now why do you talk like that? You know you're not going to quit. Which really helps him a lot. I mean, it turns a fire up about 3 degrees. Or she'll come home and really let him have it, jump all over him for something that he didn't do. And what you need to do is operate by grace. Grace, you see, the question is not my rights, but your needs. See, when your husband does that to you, ladies, or she does it to you, fellas, you got a choice to make. You can defend your rights. It's not right that you should holler at me. Or you can think about her need or his need to unload. And if you're going to operate by grace, you operate from the other person's need, and you prime the pump. Here's what you do. I'm very serious. What you do. I'll just operate from the man's point of view. As the ladies tell ladies how to handle it. Her husband. If he comes home and makes a complete jackass out of himself, I'm going to sell out and move to Florida. Really. I'm really, he's just a grand declarator because he's really. I heard. You can. My boss he's at a bad time. You can say you don't have to analyze it. You just say. You don't say, this is the 3rd time this month you've threatened that, and you're not going to do it. Why don't you be quiet? You can say, boy, you must have had a rough day. Yeah, let me tell you, it's called priming the pump. And he's good for another 10 minutes. You just pump it out. Yeah, and he'll reach, and then when he runs down, you can say, well, that must have really that must have really hurt because all the years you gave to that job and they treat you like that, it must really be hard to take. Yeah, and then he's going again. And he'll just pump it out, you see. And that's good for about 7 minutes. And then you can say, well, boy, it's no fun trying to be happy in the evening when you've had a day like that, is it? And then he's good for 3 more minutes, and pretty soon he's all pumped out. And you have a nice evening together. Isn't that better than having a fight? Prime the pump. So next time, fellas, your wife just unloads on you, you say this. Repeat after me. You can write this down. You say, well, something must have really happened to upset you like this. Something must have really hurt you, which is really the case, you see. And then she'll tell you. Understand? It's called priming the pump. It's an aid to communication. It's a great secret. But if you're going to defend your rights, it ain't going to work. So now, the second area, does that make sense to you? Yeah. So what's our rule? Grace says that we meet as near to the middle as we can, as often as we can. It means this. I'm saying that women tend to use words less specifically. You see, and another woman understands it exactly. A man doesn't. Women, remember, be careful what you say to your husband because he thinks you mean it. Get that? That's what a woman has to do. Be careful what you say to him. He thinks you mean it. What do men do? How does a man meet his wife as near to the middle as he can, as often as he can? He does this. He listens to what she's feeling, not to what she's saying. It's very hard for a man. It doesn't make any sense to men. You got that? Fellas, try to listen to what she's feeling, not necessarily to what she's saying. And sometimes you'll be closer to the truth. You see, sometimes a woman conveys how she's feeling not by what she says, but by how she says it. And if you'll learn to listen, you learn a great deal about your wife. Second area in which men and women use language differently is this, that a conversation is important to a man if the subject of that conversation is important. A conversation is important to a woman in and of itself. That is, a woman, do you ever have this go in your home? She'll say, honey, let's talk. And he'll say something brilliant like, oh, what's happened? What's up? And if she can't think of anything, she'll say, "Oh, never mind." And he'll say, "Wonder what that was all about." Or something like that. You see, now sometimes things come up, in a home, sometimes you have to do what I could all conduct business. You've got a problem with the kids, a decision has to be made. Are we going to buy this? How are we going to pay for this? Where are we going to go for Christmas? Big business, little business. You have to conduct business. You have to sit down and talk things every day, right? You have to talk things over. But see, a lot of women don't know that most men do not sit around and talk with other men even, unless something important needs to be talked about. Men have agendas. They don't have conversations, they have meetings. So they'll sit down and talk, and as soon as everything is talked about that has to be talked about that's important, he's done talking. That's how a man operates, right? And he's ready to go do something else. Conversation over. Why? We've done our business. We've followed our agenda. We've made our decisions. But a woman doesn't operate that way. A woman, listen to me, and a conversation is important to a woman if something important has to be talked about. But if nothing important has come up, a woman still needs to talk. Now here's a great secret that men need to learn about their wives. And I learned this the hard way. That a woman finds it difficult, if not impossible, to feel close to someone she does not have a lot of conversation with. A woman finds it difficult, if not impossible, to feel close to anyone, including her husband, if they do not spend a lot of time talking. Conversation for a woman is not simply communication, it is closeness. You got that? For a man, conversation is simple communication, to convey information. And a lot of men think that that's what it is for their wives. You got that? For a man, conversation is simply to convey information, communicate. But to a woman, it is that plus it is closeness. Did you ever come home, fellas, and your wife's been on the phone with her phone friend? And you say, I tried to call all afternoon. The phone was tied up. How long have you been on the phone? Oh, my, we were on there for 2 hours and a half. What'd you talk about? Oh, nothing. You spent 2.5 hours on the phone for talking about nothing. You see, I'll let you pay the phone bill next month, you see. Did they talk about nothing? Well, maybe they did or maybe they didn't. But you see the point? The point was not that the subject mattered. So here's the rule, that a man needs to learn that a conversation is important to his wife just for its own sake, if for nothing else. And a woman needs to know that her man tends to not talk about, that a conversation is important to him if the subject is important. Do you recognize that in your own marriage? How do we meet as near to the middle as we can, as often as we can? Well, here's what we do, is that women need to learn to be patient. For instance, if a man is real busy, he's got a lot of things to do that are important to him. A woman, you ought not to misinterpret his unwillingness to talk. You see, a man has a list of priorities in his mind, and conversation is not as high up on his list as it is on yours. And if he's got things to do, and you say, "Let's talk," he might not be willing to. And don't misinterpret that. Don't say, "Well, if he loved me, he'd talk with me. He never pays any attention to me." No, he's just being a man. And a man meets his wife, and I think men need to give the most in this for their own health. I think one of the reasons women live longer than men is women are better communicators, and they talk. But men need to learn the art of what I call, and don't misunderstand this, small talk. Now, by small talk, I hesitate to use that because I do not want to suggest that it's not important. I think it can be one of the most important things in a marriage sometimes. Small talk can be very big, if you understand what I mean. That is, and boy, this is hard for me because I'm a natural-born hermit. I don't know what I'm doing in the ministry. My idea of a good time is a closed door and a good book. And I grew up alone in the woods with my gun and my dog, and was perfectly happy to do it. And my wife sometimes calls me the Sphinx. Um, and I've had to learn, and it tastes great. One of the great thrills. It's an art but I still have to remind myself. Fellas, you need to learn the art of filing your agenda under tomorrow's business. Get a cup of coffee if you drink coffee. Prop up your legs on the coffee table, turn off the television, and just talk about whatever comes up. By the way, that's why couples who travel together tend to have better marriages. Because when you're in the car together, you spend a lot of hours just talking about whatever comes up. Understand? No agenda. Don't conduct any business. Don't vote on anything. Just talk about important things, unimportant things. Fellas, if you don't do that, you'll never you'll never know what's going on in your wife's heart. And you need to know that. You see, this is one of the reasons why, it's a fact that women understand their husbands much better than the husbands understand their wives. If a woman says, "Boy, I know my husband, I know how he operates, I know how he thinks, I can read him like a book," she can. She's right. A man who says, "Oh, I understand my wife, I know I can predict, I know," he's fooling himself. Most of the time, he thinks he knows his wife. You understand? Most wives understand their husbands much better than most husbands understand their wives, although husbands think they do. And one of the many reasons husbands don't understand their wives is they don't really listen. Because in most cases, you'll never really get to know your wife unless you spend a lot of hours in small talk. Just sit down and talk. And I love it. Once I learned, my wife taught me this. She taught me most of what I know, and about marriage. And took me, boy, I'm hard-headed. You know, I want to sit down in 3 minutes. See, I work with other men at the college, high-powered men, academic men. We operate by memos. We don't even write complete sentences sometimes. You know, we conduct business by memos. You wouldn't believe what we can get done in 20 minutes. I mean, old Doc Smith, our academic, sits down, and we conduct business, bang, 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 and we're done. And we seldom just sit around and talk. We'll go weeks at a time, never just sit around and just talk. We conduct business. And my inclination to do that at home. Honey, I got 4 minutes. I'm going to tell you how things are going to be. And then can't do that. So I have to learn to change gears. And I love it. It's great. So I have those short business-like conversations with my colleagues and good friends at the college. But I've learned the art, and I have to keep teaching myself. I have to keep relearning it. My favorite time is Saturday morning. It's one of the few times every week when I know we're both free. My wife works part-time. She works 3 mornings a week. She's our church secretary. Works till noon 3 mornings a week. She has for about 4 or 5 years now. And but Saturday morning, that's sort of our time. It's one of the reasons I make it a point not to be gone from home any more than one weekend, if I can, a month. In other words, this is my way. This is my Saturday away this month. Because Saturday morning is our time to get out by the pool. And makes you mad, doesn't it? And take the coffee pot out and prop up our legs and just talk. Or sit down in the living room. Or we have a favorite breakfast place. We got a farmer's market we like to go to. Saturday morning, get the farmer's market and go out and buy some vegetables, some flowers if we need them. And there's a little restaurant called the Briar Patch, and sometimes it takes us till noon to go to the market and get a few vegetables and have breakfast. But we need that, understand? I've learned that, and it's great. But I had to be taught that. Because I tell you, I can think of about 20 things I need to do on Saturday morning. And I learned over the years that those things can wait. They can wait. Some Saturdays we can't do it, understand? But that's our goal. Every Saturday morning we just sort of sit, and that's our time just to talk. And I find out what's going on in her heart. She finds out what's going on in my life. Because she's busy and I'm busy. When you got 4 kids, of course we're down to 3 now, 2 and a half. One's in college part of the time. living at the college. You get so busy, don't you? And you try to earn a living and keep the ship afloat, keep the household working. You need those times to just say, time out, and let's just sit and talk. Just talk. You get the point? And men need to learn that it's important. Let me say it again. It's a great secret. Men, I'm going to repeat this. Your wife finds it difficult, if not impossible, to feel close to you if she can't talk. I've seen women leave good men and run off with a bum because he had talked to her. I've seen that in the church. You got that? Women leave good men and run off with a bum because that bum would sit and talk to her. Probably the reason he didn't have a job and had plenty of time. Just sit and talk. You have any questions about that? This doesn't have to be a monologue. I've covered quite a bit today. Let's have some questions or comments. Do you have anything I'd like to say to disagree? I'm not saying I'm right about all these things. You have any thing you'd like to add to it? Anybody? Any questions? Don't feel shy. I'm a college teacher. I'm used to questions.
What you said is very true. You're right. That's the way it is.
Well, I knew that, but thank you. No, thank you. You're very.
For years.
Yeah.
My wife and I have been doing this for years. That was our escape.
What?
That's where my good friend Buck's at. I've been doing it for years since we was married. Get free time. We're close to God.
Yeah. Time together. Any question? I don't know how late you want to go today. Let's go for another 15 minutes, and then we'll take a break. We'll start again tonight.
Roger,
Yes.
all this you're saying is really true. It's all helpful. But what kind of advice do you have for those that don't have have made the mess of the marriage?
Uh-huh.
Let's say it like this: marriage is gone. It's all.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any?
Well, you'd have to apply it as you can in relationships and in present and any future relationships. I wish I had a good answer to your very excellent question. Well, all we can do is take these principles and apply them as opportunities present themselves. One of the hard points of life is, and let's just be honest, you can't live life backwards. You can't go back. As Thomas Wolfe says, you can't go home. Or, as I say, you can't put toothpaste back in a tube. And that's a great tragedy. And we all have regrets. I do. The best of marriages has its full quota of regrets. So it's not just unsuccessful marriages. And so all we can do is wherever we are, try to learn and go on. And listen to me, I teach this stuff, and I still mess up regularly. Regularly. It's hard. And I spend half my time kicking myself. It's a great gymnastic art. It's true, you see. And
Although, Roger, I do see a lot of principles of what you're saying, what you're teaching, can apply to God's people.
that's an excellent point. They sure can. God's people need to learn to listen to each other. Yeah. It's one of the reasons I think fellowship is so important in the church. True fellowship, not just eating. When I was a little boy, I thought fellowship supper was one word. Somebody say fellowship, and I'd start salivating like Pavlov's dog. I thought we were going to eat. I thought we were going to eat. But fellowship is much more than pass the beans. And fellowship is this genuine reading of each other's hearts. Now, a few more things about conversation. And this might be a third difference between men and women. A woman, now this is just as it were, this thing about the use of language overlaps. Women are more likely to tell things about themselves in their conversations than men are, personal stuff. Let me illustrate it or explain it this way. Every person, man or woman, has an area of their life which is what I call the no trespassing zone, where nobody is allowed in there but God. And maybe some people don't even let him in, unfortunately. That is, we have those, we might, now that's not, I'm not talking about necessarily evil in the life. It may be sin or past sins or whatever it is. Every person has that area of his life where he doesn't let anybody else in, or she doesn't. No trespassing. You don't talk about it. It's just nobody. It's nobody's business. You understand? I've got an area in my life. It's nobody's business except me, except God. And all kinds of things can be in that territory. What I'm saying, does that make sense to you? And what I'm saying is that for most, that this area tends to be smaller for a woman than it is for a man. That is, women will tell other women more intimate or private things about themselves than a man will tell another man. You recognize that? That is, women will often do this. Now, there are two mistakes, and here I think it's a mistake that women make and men. I think men sometimes, in regard to their wives, make this area too big. You got that? I think men mistake some areas of their lives as no trespassing zones when they really ought to let their wife in. Some areas. I think men tend to make the area too large. I think of no trespassing. I think women tend to make it too small. Women need to sometimes tell less, and men sometimes to tell more. But regardless of that, women have no right to tell things about their husband that they would not tell about themselves. It's a mistake that young couples often make. Serious damage is done. I'll just say this to any wife here. You have no right to tell any other person, not your best friend, not any person, anything about your husband that he wouldn't tell them. You have no right to do that. That's the first thing. I know marriages have been seriously damaged because when he hears it, when he hears that word that things have been told about the marriage, about the relationship, or about him that he would not tell, his wife did, and he hears it sort of in the marketplace. And listen, women or ladies, he'll never forgive you for that. He'll work at it, but you see, a man is very sensitive about his no trespassing zone, more than you are. And a lot of women don't realize that. Again, women treat their husbands as if they were other men. Other women, I mean. They simply say, well, you know, why are you so uptight? Why do you care? You see, often a man will say, that was nobody's business. When she can't figure out why, she'll say, why not? What's wrong with it? You understand? And even though his no trespassing zone ought to be a bit smaller, it's still his no trespassing zone. Ladies, you might make the judgment that he shouldn't be so sensitive about those areas. But you may be right. But the fact is, it's his no trespassing zone. You stay off of it. You don't have any right to in your talk to tell things about. You understand? Two women tell each other a lot of things that men don't even know about, and can't imagine one person telling another person. Now, does that make sense to you? That's the rule, especially for older women. Sometimes learn that the hard way. Because, boy, if he gets it from out here in the marketplace, if your husband tells you something in confidence, and you share it, and he hears it from a third party, it's going to be a long time before he'll talk to you again. And a lot of wives will betray confidences not because they're trying to be unkind or unfair or dishonest, but because they don't really understand why he should care. Understand? They don't understand why he should care if she tells that, which he told her. A woman wouldn't care. Why does he care? So she tells it. And then she wonders why he turns into a closed mouth. But listen, I'll just tell you, ladies, if he tells you something which he considers to be intimate, whether it is or not, he lets you into his no trespassing zone for a little bit, and you tell it, and he hears about it. It's going to be a long time before he tells you anything else. And you deserve exactly what you get. Now, on the other hand, a man needs to realize that a woman is a woman, not a man. And I think he needs to quit being so. As a woman, see, a woman doesn't really understand, fellas, all that large and no trespassing zone. She understands. She doesn't. She has a hard time dealing with that. Now, the second thing we need to learn in this regard is that there's this modern, and we sort of went through it in the 60s and 70s and early 80s. The idea that a true man spills his guts. How shall I say it? The idea of the strong, silent type, Gary Cooper, John Wayne, that's old hat. Although I think there's a lot more to be said for that than people are admitting now. But a man is not the strong, silent type. He's the truly sensitive type who just tells everything. He's supposed to cry a whole lot, and I think there's a lot to be said about that. But he's supposed to be sensitive like a woman. And it didn't work out very well, by the way, because it's not true. A man is not a woman, unless he's anyway. Let me tell you something, and women need to learn. This is something women need to learn from men. That sometimes the worst thing you can do is tell it. The idea is if you tell it and get it out in front, then everything is better. That is false. Sometimes it's much worse. Sometimes it's much worse. Sometimes the best thing to do is just keep your mouth shut and let God deal with it. You understand? The idea that every problem is made better by talking about it. That is storefront psychology that came out of the 60s and 70s, and there's just enough truth in it to make it dangerous. Every problem is made better by talking about it. You heard that? That's popular. And it is not true. Sometimes it's true. But sometimes all you do is make a problem much worse by talking about it. And by the way, psychologists have learned this the hard way, that they would get patients who had small problems, and they would get them to talk about it, and those small problems became big problems, like chewing on beef jerky. The longer you chew, the bigger it gets. And so what I'm saying is let's be very careful. And sometimes women will dig at their husband, dig, to get him to tell stuff, to spill his guts, and then he feels betrayed. You must be very careful to make a man tell more than he really wants to tell. And fellas, I think sometimes we ought to feel less apologetic. Sometimes we need to just pray for forgiveness or whatever we have to do, or work things through with God, keep our mouth shut, and go on. There's more to be said for silence than has been admitted for the last 25 years. Does that make sense to you? Now, again, it takes wisdom to know which is which. But sometimes we need to just keep our mouth shut and go on. Now, and ladies, every preacher knows this, by the way. I learned this. I've had people, and when I went through that stage when I read all the books, and I did some counseling. If I went back into the local ministry, I'd do about 1/10 of the counseling that I did when I left the local ministry to go into teaching. I found out by the time I'd left the local ministry that counseling was pretty much a waste of time. If they didn't do what I said when I said it in the pulpit, they didn't do it when I said it in the study. Most of the time, all they wanted was for me to agree that what they were going to do was okay when it wasn't. That's right. And not always. But I found this, that sometimes people would sit in my office and spill their guts, to use my crude phrase, tell things that they really had no business telling, and I, like an idiot, encourage them to do it because I'd been told that would, if they get it out, it'll make it better. And then, of course, they had to go to another church because they couldn't face me in the pulpit week by week because I knew stuff that I had no business knowing. They should have taken it to God and let him deal with it. You understand? Especially if it's a man. I've had men tell me stuff, and then they couldn't look me in the face. So let's realize that men and women are different. It's a bigger problem for men than it is for women. So wives, encourage your husband to talk. Men, talk more. But there's a line to be drawn. And don't make your husband tell you what he doesn't want to tell you. Because if he does, you might regret it. Do you understand what I'm saying? And it takes a great deal of wisdom to know when to talk and when to be quiet. Well, I hope that this has made sense. We're going to. I'm going to quit now. We're 3 o'clock. And we're going to start again at 7:30 tonight. Tonight, here we'll tell you what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about very briefly time to live, the principle of time, which is very. James Dobson says the number one killer of marriages is the poor use of time. I don't know if he's right about that, but it's certainly an important issue. Then we're going to talk about the importance of romance in marriage. It's one of my favorite subjects. We're going to talk about the principle. More important to date after the wedding than before, and also more fun. And the art of gift giving, and a few other minor details. We're going to talk about married life. And in the morning, we're going to start on the art of being a parent, secrets and skills for being a parent.